Good morning, everybody. It's your boy Ryan here with another episode of Sales Chatter. This morning, I actually got somebody with me. So we're actually looking forward to going through, as you guys can tell, we're going to be talking about air freight today and what kind of comes with it and everything like that. Let's hit that intro.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
All right, awesome. Good morning, Jay. As everybody knows, we had Jay last week. Yesterday, we had a conversation, and I was like, you know what? I really want to dig in deep into a part of transportation that we not suddenly gets talked about, right? So, Jay, good morning. Welcome to the show. How's it going?
Good morning, Ryan. Glad to have listen to you about it.
Morning, Ash. It's going good. It's going good. Morning, Ashley. Morning, Lisa. Lisa, you are second place today, so you got to step it up a little bit. And morning, LinkedIn. I think that's actually probably my sister because we don't get to see the name or anything like that. It's something we kind of want to talk about. How's everything going on since the week that you've been on the show last week?
Logistics is logistics, right? Everyone throws a curveball every day, so it's fun and exciting. How's it being solo? I don't see the other rep anymore on the show.
Yeah, so yesterday was it was definitely a learning experience. If anybody kind of remember, well, no, nobody would know this, but my family friends, I used to do YouTube like back in the day. I want to say maybe like 10 years or so like that. Shout out to the Tumbais. That was our thing, and just doing it alone yesterday. A lot of anxiety, to be completely honest. And maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later and things like that. But it was something that I thought I didn't do so well, but then just talking to everybody, shout out to everybody who's been so supportive. Reached out to Chris Jolly for some advice and stuff like that. Shout out to him as well. And it's something that's, it's a work in progress. As Lisa says, her mobile app has a lag. We're going to blame it on the California data. Good morning, Daman. I know Damon's out on the West Coast. Daman is sponsor on the show, the owner of Centurion Trucking. Good morning, brother. So nice to see you. I hope you see the tablas in the back, and yeah, you've been practicing.
But if you don't have the people, talking with you, it feels like you're talking to yourself. Huh?
Yeah, you know what? I felt like I was doing like a TikTok review or something like that. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna be doing like some random cooking video or something like that. But it was cool. It was something to kind of step out of my comfort zone and something to notch on my belt. And it's amazing to have somebody here with me. So
Yeah.
I know Dan Get Better, Jeff. I think Jeff and Dean will be with us tomorrow. So yeah, put some ones in the comments if you think I did a horrible job yesterday, and I should definitely not do videos alone. But with that being said, man, let's dig into this. Air freight. For me, I've done maybe less than 5 air freight shipments. It's something that I know everyone kind of like during the pandemic, everyone kind of talked about container shipments. Everyone talked about like everything that was kind of going on at the ports. The kind of thoughts that people have is that air freight is pretty expensive. That's why people kind of stay away from it. But the less than 5 shipments that I did was that we went from Toronto to Vancouver in less than, I want to say, less than 5 to 6 hours or so, just a direct flight. And that whole process was seamless. And I know that that's something that I'd like to see more of. Jay, I know that you do some air shipments as well. Today's episode, I really want to kind of get into the bare bones in terms of what your experience is like, what you guys are currently doing, and then we can kind of go back and forth. So in terms of that, what are you kind of looking at in terms of air freight? What is kind of like the markets or things like that you kind of work on?
So air freight, what is air freight? Air freight is essentially another value-added supply chain route to get goods delivered. So you could, it's like another expedite, right? We can say, about like few years ago when everyone strayed away from air freight just because it's how expensive it is. But again, air freight now, I feel like it's been a little bit more saturated where we're getting more aggressive rates. I've seen over the pandemic, we've seen ridiculous rates before, going from Ontario to BC at like 16K last year. But at the same time, the price of air freight was literally hovering around the same thing. So people started now using it, getting exposed to it. So I feel in the years to come, air freight would be a good viable option for account managers or users to use it. On my side of things, our team uses air freight for a lot of cannabis stuff. So getting it on time delivery, just because that particular part of of freight that they use it for is very, very costly if they miss the delivery. So hence, they don't trust over the road, and they prefer to go the air freight way, right?
Of
So
course.
door to door, pickup is give you. I'm gonna do a quick breakdown of how it works. Okay, so basically door to door, the pickup is loaded into a truck based on customer needs, whether it be dry van or reefer. Nowadays, both the air cargo you can use both the reefer side and the dry side based on capacity. The truck is then unloaded at the airport. It gets processed. It goes through a very extraneous processing pattern at the airport, and then finally last mile delivery. Either you go with the airport or you hire your own guys to get the last mile delivery. So that's essentially what door to door air freight is.
Both them there, and I know exactly like the instructions that they have at the airport. It's very strenuous, right? Like I know, like for myself, I've personally done lobsters where we pick up from the Atlantic, bring them to Toronto, and then we actually ship them overseas. And that whole pre-screening, sometimes it takes a bit of a while, and with all the paperwork and all those things that kind of go into that. You mentioned that you guys do cannabis as well. How long have you guys been doing cannabis?
Well, we've been doing it for the last few years now, all across North America. Right now, everyone prefers it's with the cannabis industry being so saturated. Everyone prefers going over the road, but there are times when push comes to shove, you have to meet the delivery standards. And yeah, hey Jay, we got to go to BC now. So we got to get into capacity, what Air Canada has to offer, or whatever their incumbents has to offer, and get on that plane ASAP to get delivered.
So when you kind of mentioned that, hey, it's expedited, it's something that needs to go right away. Like no one's gonna ship a pallet of like bottled water, like it's not feasible like that to go there, right? It's gonna be really expensive. But with that being said, like you said, in terms of like from your side, who books like the flights, and how does that is it a situation where you guys kind of send it off to a vendor, they kind of take care of it, or is there something that you guys personally have to kind of take care of on your own as well?
So good question. So right now we're in the process of getting set up as an air cargo member. We're going through the certifications, which again takes a lot of time. But right now we're using our third party resources. So essentially what we do is as soon as we get a tender or a quotation, we get it over to our freight forwarders, and they'll pretty much do the whole how much pallets if we can put on X flight or Y flight flying out today, and provide us a quotation based on the skid size, if it's 4x4x4, if it's ambient temperature, whatever temperature related, and how many cases, right? If we can get that all aligned, then the EWB bills and all that follows shortly after, and we get it sent over.
Sent over there. So when you guys like mentioned like the pallet size and stuff like that, is there like a maximum that you can share with us, like in terms of what they actually look for that you can't oversee? Like from my mindset, like I don't know anything about air freight other than the shipments that I've done. So it's like, hey, can I put a 44,000 pound shipment on there? I would assume not, but maybe things are different now.
I never have to be quite honest. Usually when I do air freight or when my agents do air freight, it's usually one pallet, two pallets. We don't see. Well, I don't regularly see. I'm not going to speak on behalf of others, but usually I see maximum 2 to 3 pallets, right, based on skid count and whatever plane is going in that direction, and we stick them in, right.
Perfect. And on average, what do you think that you guys are kind of doing monthly in terms of like air freight at business partners?
Maybe 1 to 2 shipments a month at the very most.
Okay.
Again, we use third party, so we're spending time on the educational aspect, so we get licensed. So on monthly, it's 1 to 2 shipments a month using a third party vendor.
And I know that you mentioned off camera that like you guys are kind of going through that whole process and stuff like that. Are you able to kind of kind of peel a little bit layer behind, like let's say somebody wants to become certified or something like that? Like what kind of process has looked for you guys so far?
So there's a CIFA portion that you have to do where you're doing quizzes and read through material. As soon as you do that, you do a final exam. As soon as you're finished that component of it, then there's a IATA exam, which is dangerous goods, which you also get certified. Upon completion of those two, then you can go ahead and apply for licensing.
So it's basically a long-term process, but at the end of the day, they have to vet the right people here. Like as you mentioned, you guys do 1, 2 shipments. What is kind of like your experience with it? Like obviously, like it obviously gets there faster. How do your customers is it a situation where I would assume they're just much more happier with the shipments getting there faster, or do you think that hey, they can do the trucking route if they kind of plan it out a little bit better?
For intra Canada, they're not very not happy. Well, I will say because they're paying X amount of dollars, which is like triplicate or even quadruple the amount of over the road. But when it comes to like say going to Australia, Germany, and so on and so forth, yeah, it's an experience, right? To get there on time. As long as you have all your ducks aligned, all your paperwork aligned, the process is seamless. It's very quick. But hence why they charge you, 50, 60,000 going down overseas, right? You pay wait for what you get for it.
Yeah, exactly. You get what you pay for. And I remember when I used to do like a little bit of container shipments, like they like with other providers, and basically they just kind of tell us, hey, we'll pick it up, and when it gets there, it gets there. Like there's no really there's no really timelines. Like they could tell you whatever, but then I know once my shipment hit, like the boat hit like a storm, so it was like, well, we're not gonna when it gets there. Hopefully, it gets there all together in one piece.
Well, you can't provide macro point as some Sarah tracking.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe that's a new business venture that we need to do. Get to macro point or four kites or something like that.
Who could build a GPS device for tracking.
Yeah, like make sure it's waterproof, stormproof and everything like that.
Yeah, it's in the air. Where's your shipments? Up in the air.
Just going over the equipment. It's like the Santa Claus, like when you're looking at the Santa Claus tracking. Just want to shout out to DJ. Love you, brother. Hope everything's doing well. Can't wait. The DJ actually has a show every Thursday, I believe at 3:00. Just kind of like motivation and stuff like that with his host. So DJ is amazing, guys. So with like air freight specifically, when you guys kind of started and you kind of like, what are things that you kind of look for in like your provider that you're kind of using? Is it simple that hey, relationships through the Vine that you're having conversations with people like hey, this is my air freight guy, you should go out to him, or like what kind of research went into that to find like the right provider for you guys?
So so how we have it positioned here at Business Borders is each one we have an agent for their own niche, right? So we have an intermodal guy, we have an air freight guy, we have perishable, non-perishable, so on and so forth. But when you do the pitch to a consumer or a customer, you're pitching them the whole value-added supply chain. What I could bring to the table, I can provide you, X, Y, Z. From there, that conversation is, can we get quotes? Obviously, that's where it goes, right? Can we get quotes based on, can we get intermodal quotes? Can we get over-the-road quotes? And finally, you know what? Can we get a non-obligation air freight quote? So now you're channeling in three different directions, right? So whatever the customer asks for, we provide, and from there they would understand. Hey, so why is this more than this? Then there's the educational component of the sales pitch. Why are you paying this much? Well, air freight's going from point A to point B very fast, right? You get delivered on time, hence why you pay 3 times as much more than an LTL shipment, which is probably not going to be there for a couple of weeks, right? So it's the educational component where you have with your customer, how you prep them for the quote or anything of that nature.
And I think that's perfect that you guys are doing that, right? Because like so much of the days, let's say, hey, I need a rate from Toronto to Montreal or something like that. We'll come back with the rate, but you guys are providing the different options, right? The different modes, saying, hey, we can do this truckload, we can do this LTL, we can do it by plane, we can do it by these kind of options, and that kind of opens it up for the customer, right? When you give the customer choices, even though you know what they're gonna pick, right? Because like that they're not gonna go ahead and pick that air freight for depending on what they serve, but with timelines and things like that, I know with trade shows and logistics show logistics, they will opt for that because they need that there, or it affects their insurance. If anybody's done any kind of trade show or anything like that, throw some ones in the comments, and I'd love to kind of hear your kind of feedback on that as well. But coming back to it, like you mentioned, that you guys use your providers, you guys have your own people there as well to provide the air freight. In terms of like the price and stuff like that, have you guys found any kind of challenges with air freight specifically, or has it kind of just been running smoothly? Like, has there been planes completely booked up? What do you kind of feedback on that?
All planes. Well, over the pandemic, it was tough. Don't get me wrong, it was tough. But everyone that chooses that air cargo route knows what they're paying for. So they're already they're prepped to hear that number. So if I throw 20,000 at them, it's like, hey, no, what's a shock? You know what? So they're already prepped if they're going down that route, right? So in terms of capacity-wise, nowadays it's more of capacity. From going from Atlantic to Ontario or Ontario to BC 2, 3 different flights are running. So if there's no capacity on the first flight, you're gonna go the day before, right? And that reflects on you telling the customer and the customer actually booking their own appointment, because it's gonna be faster than an over-the-road transit where, for example, Ontario to BC on a team, it takes about 3 days, right? Whereas this shipment will go in within that day or the day and a half, right? So you have that flexibility.
And since these things are much higher, and like everybody who kind of does high value rate, from as a business owner yourself, is from a risk standpoint, is there certain things when you guys are when you guys are onboarding like a customer who will be doing freight, I'm sorry, will be doing air freight, is there things that you guys look for in terms of like terms or anything like that, that is different from, like, let's say, the regular consumer that you would see?
So, like I said, as of now, we are going through a third party, so everything goes through him, he or she. But when we do get licensed and forwarded, yeah, we got to get a lawyer involved to see, payment terms and risk, understanding risk, so on and so forth. But again, with what we're dealing with right now, same thing, 30-day cycle. You have to understand cargo value. They're treated like an LTL shipment. Does the provider have any additional insurance, or do we need rider insurance, right? So any of that nature, our third party will, ask our agent what we need in order for this to get delivered successfully. But again, you're not going to see theft or whatever on the airplane, right? So at least
I would hope not, man. I don't think anybody would want to go to the government. That's the one place that you wouldn't want to see theft. So from there, and Lisa kind of mentions here, as we're kind of talking about giving the customer, empower them to make the choice. And you're completely right, Lisa. You want to give those options to the customer, let them decide what they want, and then they'll decide within their business. Because, one thing, just kind of go a little bit off track here, was that we, like the company I work with, is that we offer warehousing as well, like our own warehouse. And I realized that, hey, we weren't moving shipments with certain customers or prospects. I offer that warehousing portion, and it's something that you're giving them more options. You're actually just being somebody more than an order taker. I'm a big believer that anybody can book trucks. Anybody can get a load board, they can get that, they can get load link, they can go and book a truck. But when it comes down to it, it's being that solution provider. Jeff mentioned something here. Morning, Ryan J. Keep killing it. Hopefully you're having a wonderful vacation, Jeff. And I want to see that notebook that you've been talking about past couple, like last week, in terms of what you're planning for the rest of the year. So, Jay, well, like you mentioned, you guys are doing the air freight. You guys work with somebody else, and it's 1 or 2 shipments. I kind of want to dive deeper into a little bit, like you mentioned, the cannabis stuff, because hate this pun, but I have to do it anyways. But it feels like you're flying high whenever you guys are doing shipments. But in terms of like the cannabis, you mentioned like they're everywhere. There's so many companies. I feel like when one closes down, you see another 5 pop up. And in terms of you guys doing it here, can you dive a little bit deeper into like how you guys kind of got into cannabis, what things you guys kind of look for, and maybe if there's any kind of outlook that you guys kind of have in case anybody listening here would like to kind of move those shipments?
Well, going back to cannabis shipments, it's pretty much sales agents prospecting. You land an account here and there, and it happened to roll over, and we got a few shipments that were cannabis. Initially over the road, there's a lot of insurance involved, a lot of licensing. Insurances does not let them putting cannabis into a typical reefer because of issues with putting 2 different shipments into the same truck that has cannabis. If cannabis is stolen, then it just jeopardizes the truck itself, right? So going from there, resources, everyone's dedicated, but going dedicated, it's a lot of money, right? Just putting from one pad going to Ontario to BC, and not even New Brunswick to Alberta, it's like, who knows, like 5, 6, 7 Gs, whatever the case may be, right? Whereas when they consolidate it or when they air freight it, it's come to the same cost itself nowadays, right? So that's why customers prefer now putting it on planes where it goes faster and it gets delivered in time, right? Who wants to hear a truck broke down when it's going to a DC where it needs to get distributed on that day of, right? So that's why in that particular niche, everyone prefers the air cargo, right? Yeah, I've heard of air cargo coming from overseas where it could be glass and so on and so forth, but in Canada, what I feel, most of the air cargo is cannabis.
Okay, so from there, because like I said, I think like that high value thing, like, right, like kind of going back to what I kind of did before with like the lobsters and stuff like that, like that stuff you can't, I don't know, you really can't trust. Like even a reefer, we had a situation where you'd always kind of have like a count of like how many dead lobsters you're gonna have because these are live, right? So it's a situation where here these customers they need it right away, right? And Jeff
Yeah.
brings up a good point here when he says here the first question I would ask is why are you moving air freight? As this would open other opportunities, sorry, open other doors for opportunities, and that's a good question to ask because obviously at the top of all supply chains, air freight is going to be the most expensive one option. And if they're consistently moving that, there's a reason why they're doing that, right? And it could open up other opportunities from there. So good point you mentioned there. Like as you kind of said, like people you can't use a reefer with cannabis shipments. What have you kind of seen in terms of um, like you said, all your sales agents, they do their prospecting and things like that. Um, for your own self, what do you kind of look for in terms of like the prospects that you kind of go over? Is there certain niches that you kind of work in, as obviously being the owner of business partners?
Like me personally, I'm all reefer, right? I'm all reefer freight. I don't look into air freight. We do air freight, but most of my, unless it's emergency, this has to get delivered on time. Uh, for example, say yogurt or say milk. No one's gonna ask me, hey Jay, let's transport a full Bombardier full, you know, down to Walmart so we can get all this milk on time, right? So it I guess it all depends on the commodity, right? If the more and also the more value added or the more high value cargo it is, because back in the days they were moving. Back in the days when no one was moving cannabis through planes, they were using Brinks trucks, right? Dedicated
Mm,
trucks with cops in the front, cops in the back. That was back in the days, right? But now everyone's just flying it. You know, it gets they know it's safe. It gets processed, secured, and then last mile delivered. So it has transitioned over time, but for me, my shipments, my niche is different as opposed to my sales agents.
yeah, of course, and that's why you're able to even have the conversation about air freight, right? Because you're kind of learning from them as well, what
Exactly.
they're kind of doing, and you're seeing everything from there. In terms of like the air freight, so let's say somebody like our podcast is kind of like aimed for people who are obviously in logistics and they want to try new things and they kind of want to get into like air freight and things like that. Um, when you're having those conversations with the customer and your sales agents are having those conversations with their customers about, hey, air freight, where do you guys kind of need to get this moved? Has there been a situation with your sales agents to the top of your mind that they've been able to kind of follow along like the whole journey in terms of, hey, seeing like their plane like leave, like checking on the tracking website and things like that, and providing those like value adds, like, hey, Mr. Customer, your shipment left Pearson Airport at 4:55 expected trend. Like, is there kind of like value added in the kind of customer service when shipments are in transit?
So again, going back to the cannabis side, because that's all I could give reference to, is we pick it up, we deliver it to like a cargo warehouse where it gets processed, checked, double, triple checked if everything is good, meets the requirements to get onto the plane. Once it gets onto the plane, again, it goes through an extraneous process again, screening, because it could be a cargo passenger plane as well, where you don't want any liability issues or anything like that. Once it gets in, it gets double checked. Then again, it's just like your boarding ticket where we see when we fly. You know where the plane's going at all times. I don't know if you know now when you hop on an international plane, as soon as you put your plane number on it, it shows you from point A to point B and where it lands and all that, right? So it's a macro point for the same plane as well, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's getting there from
It's
there.
not, it's not like my CSR team would jump in and let them know, here, this is where your plane is. You can physically go yourself and tell the customer itself, there, this is the plane that's going on. This is when you know you're expecting ETA. Once it reaches, it's obviously going to go through another screening cycle and then last mile delivery.
Last mile delivery. And like as mentioned, these are expedite situations that are happening. Have you kind of seen on your end where like these air flight, like how planned out in advance are these shipments kind of scheduled for?
Maybe 3 hours. Hey Jay, I gotta get it going.
Oh,
ASAP.
really? Oh, really? So wow, that's honestly crazy.
If it's pre-planned, no one's gonna pay X amount of dollars to get it. They rather find a solution where they can LTL it, or they could, at the end of the day, it's their cost that they're trying to save cost on their end. But when shit hits the fan, it's that 3 hour call where you're trying to grab a flight right away.
Right, right, right. And as you mentioned the LTL that you guys kind of so with the cannabis kind of touching on that a little bit, have you guys kind of does cannabis get like consolidated as LTL? Is there providers that kind of do that? Because I would think like my mindset is like, hey, let's just full truckload it, just make sure everything is safe here, and kind of go from there. What's kind of thoughts on that?
Everything should be done, dedicated based on if you have the insurance, right? But again, we live and we work in an environment where people like to bend rules here and there, right? So they do it at their own risk. So
Okay.
they pretty much LTL it without having the insurance aspect of it, but they do it at their own risk.
Yeah, because like even when I was doing like when we did the lobsters, like we worked with a company that we would basically consolidate other so the lobster community. If anybody's going after lobsters in the Atlantic, it's a very small community. It's a very everybody knows each other, everybody knows the trucks, everybody knows everybody in solution there. But basically, what they would do is that there'll be one company that only has like 2 pallets to send, and then they can grab another pallet from another customer, and then they basically consolidate that, and then basically bring it down to the cargo and have that all shipped out overseas, which is important, right? Like they can't miss those flights based on the high value of it. I couldn't imagine anything other than canvas or like something high value that would need to go air freight, but it's still a good thing to talk to your customers about, knowing that, hey, if they need a situation like this, like we've seen it too, like in situations, I don't know if Jay, if this has been a situation that you've kind of faced, but I've faced, hey, somebody, one of our trade show drivers broke down, they got sick or something like that, and we actually had to fly somebody, a driver, to the location to actually pick up the truck and trailer and actually finish the location. So there's just different modes that that basically comes with it.
With air freight, usually for what I see on the cannabis side, is these guys are publicly traded and they need to make that last minute revenue or whatever the case may be. And it's that last minute on the 29th or the 30th, they want to push X amount out or, something like that. I see a lot of, that cargo jets or cargo air cargoes getting booked during that time over the last few months, just so that they get that last minute revenue so that they can show their shareholders or anything along those lines.
Yeah, so they can't complain about Drake taking like a short flight from like Toronto to Hamilton or something like that, right? So they actually got to put some freight on there. All right. Well, honestly, that's been like such a great introduction. Like I think like I this is something I definitely want to go through and like as we kind of go through the episodes and things like that. Before we kind of hit with everything with the pitch and everything like that. Jay, like we mentioned like last week, how people can get in contact with you if they want to find out more about air freight, things like that. What's the best way somebody can reach out to you?
Yeah, my direct line or my email address, which I think Ryan will put up for me.
Yeah, we'll have it. Everyone will kind of like see it on LinkedIn and everything like that. And I'll definitely be able to put it up there. But I want to thank you so much for coming out. This was honestly something that I really, really wanted to hear about. So I'm actually looking forward to replaying it and actually listening and taking a little bit of nuggets there. Thanks everybody, all the viewers. You guys are amazing. We had an amazing turnout this morning. We will be hitting the replay at 12 p.m. Eastern time and 3 p.m. Eastern time as well on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Tomorrow is Data Day with Dean. Jay, make sure you tune into that one because those Wednesdays are amazing to like go back to your customer and give them the value. Jeff will join us tomorrow as well. So I want to say thank you to everybody once again. Keep crushing it. And honestly, you're just one call, one email, one text away from basically changing your life.
Centurion Trucking, our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion